The fellowship, but it's time to get this show on the road. Wallace. There you go. There we go. All right. Good evening. It's great to see everyone here this evening. I called you out, Troy. I hope you don't mind.
I'm gathering them up.
Let us begin songs tonight with song number 154. Number 154. Jesus, keep me near the cross, there a precious fountain, free to all the healing stream, flows from Calvary's mountain. In the cross, be song number 208. 208. Sing to me of heaven, sing that song of peace, from the toils that bind me it will bring release. Burdens will be lifted that are pressing so, showers of great blessing o'er my heart will flow. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly dream of its golden to me of heaven, sing that old sweet song. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly dream of its golden glory, of its pearly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven, sing the song of all. Next song, number 239. 239. Sweetly, Lord, have we heard thee calling, come, follow me. And we see where thy footsteps falling lead us to thee. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus where'er they go. If they lead through the temple holy, preaching the word, or in homes of the poor and lowly, serving the Lord. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus where'er they go. Then at last, when on high he sees us, our journey done, we will rest where the steps of Jesus end at his throne. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus where'er they go. The last song this evening, song number 202. 202. Beyond the sand of parting, losing and leaving, far beyond the losses darkening this, and far beyond the taking and the bereaving, lies a summer land of bliss, land beyond, so fair and bright, land beyond. Summer land. land beyond, so fair and bright, land beyond, where is the night, somewhere then God is its light, oh happy summer land of bliss. Amen. Before I get on to asking for announcements, I just want to give a quick update on Colleen. This is from a message that Matthew sent earlier this morning. She has been moved out of the ICU and then to the 6th floor of St. Luke's. Room number is 664. Do we have any more updates for her?
I spoke with her for a short minute, and she was smiling and working on recovery.
Smiling and working on recovery. It's a good thing to hear. Are there any other announcements that need to be made? Ladies' night out tomorrow, 6 at a Mexican restaurant in Vinton. If you want more details, please see Jessica for those. Any announcements?
And then probably have an announcement about Terry coming back.
Well, he flies in tonight on the honor flight, so I got some pictures through the day, so they're having a nice time. Valerie and Vicki are both there, so.
It's good to hear.
For another service there.
Good to hear.
So they're having a great time.
Yeah, I would say Terry's coming back, but that feels weird for me to say Terry. So Grandpa is coming back tonight. Long day. They had to be at the airport at 5:45, I think, and then they get back at 9:20, and that's from an hour change back here. So it would be 10:20 DC time. But yeah, I think they're in the air. We got a message from Valerie. They're on the plane before we started services tonight. So good to hear that they're headed back here. So. If there are no other announcements, let's bow and be dismissed in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful for this time that you've given us this day that we get to come together just as a congregation to sing songs of praise unto your name and to learn more about you through your word. Dear Lord, we're thankful for this building that we are able to meet in, that we have a dry place, a warm place, and that we can just, be together with one another and fellowship and to again, learn more about you. Dear Lord, thank you so much for your Son and the sacrifice that he gave. In his name we pray. Amen. Good evening. I did want to make one small announcement for the adults here. If you would like to take some of the new mover baskets for the month of May, we have 4. And so they're all going to the same place. I believe it's just either the retirement community or whatever it's retirement community, assisted living. So they're all going to the same place, but don't feel pressure to take all 4. It would probably be best if 4 separate people just take one basket. They're in the preacher's office on the left-hand side. There's 4 baskets, and then all you have to do is just personalize the letter and sign it, and then deliver the basket. And so I know that they'll love getting the visit. I went with Callahan to a couple of them, and they talked about Callahan for like 20 minutes. They were talking about how cute he was, and they were talking about their grandkids and great-grandkids, and so they had a great time. So you're able to also make the connection with the congregation and see, do they have a place to go? Do they normally go someplace? And there's also a little cutout in there detailing our live streaming, like details and things. And so you can give that to them as well. So if they're not able to, of course, come here, they can watch us, and there's contact information for the congregation. Yes, please. And you don't have to return them if you don't want to. So, no, it'd probably be best if you return them. Okay, let's get back to the book of Judges. We're now in chapter 6. And so if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open up. We'll be going verse by verse as we normally do. Now, we're going to be covering Gideon for probably the next 2, maybe 3 weeks. And so the chapter that we have before us today is about 40 verses. And so I'll change up the format a little bit. So we might have some little lessons along the way. But it might take the entire class period going through all of those verses. So we may start next class period going over some of the major lessons, and then we'll move on to chapter 7. And so the whole purpose of us studying the book of Judges is to learn from the failure of God's people. And so the only real mistake is one from which we learn nothing. And so when you look at this kind of a lesson, you might think that it sounds a little bit negative, just looking at kind of the failings of God's people. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can take that and turn it into a positive by learning from what they've done so that we don't make the same mistakes as them. And God would want us to learn from that, how we can avoid it. And so either you were in this kind of a situation, or you've just come out of this situation, or you're about to go into this situation. But have you ever had a very demanding situation in your life? Maybe a very demanding family situation. You know, someone's going through a tragedy or health difficulties, or maybe you've gone through persecution at work. So perhaps there's something going on at work, and you're either ostracized or there's some issue that's weighing heavy on you. Or maybe you have a personal tragedy that's in your own personal life or with your own health or something you're struggling with. Or maybe there's just the weight of the responsibility of everyone in your life, all the people that you have to care for and to take care of. Maybe that's weighing heavy on you. And if you're struggling with any of those things, it may be very difficult to see how God factors into all of those situations. And so what we're going to learn from this next judge is he was an individual who did not see how he fit into God's plan. And he's going to be going through a lot of difficult times, but he had to keep his eyes on God and to do it God's way, and that was able to see him through the difficulty before him. So we're going to be able to learn a lot from the individual that is named Gideon. And so Gideon is a very strong name. I know, Jan, I know you like the name Gideon. And so the more I've been studying Gideon, the more I've really taken him as a Bible character. He's a fascinating man, a very strong man, although he doesn't really start out that way. God sees, I think, a lot more in him than he did at the very beginning. But really, we can see our way through the difficulties of life if we do things God's way. Something I want to kind of make a note of, in the Faith Hall of Fame, as we call it, in Hebrews chapter 11, there's a little portion in there where a few of the judges are mentioned from the book of Judges. And guess who the first judge that is mentioned? It's actually Gideon. And in fact, it's not mentioning some of the judges in any chronological order. And so I think it might be because Gideon really stands out among a lot of the judges. He's a very strong man, and there's a lot of good that God is going to be able to do through him. Now let's go back to the map. And as you see here, I have the box over Gideon and the kind of the region that he is from. I know Val is normally one who kind of remembers like the tribes that people are from. But does anyone know the tribe that Gideon is from? Before we even get into studying about Gideon. Manasseh. So Gideon is from the tribe of Manasseh. And as you see the arrows that are going up from Gideon, the people that he's going to be fighting against are the Midianites. And I believe the Midianites also kind of bring in the Amorites as well to help them. And so that is the location that we're going to be looking at. And then we'll have another map later on that'll talk about some of the tribes that are going to help Gideon fight. Because there's a tribe that did not come to help Deborah and Barak, but they come to help Gideon. So that's kind of an interesting thing to note. So now let's go to the outline that we have for chapter 6. I've titled this chapter, Threshing Wheat in a Wine Press, because that is the event that we're going to see Gideon doing or being involved in when he's first introduced to us. Now, the first 10 verses, we're going to call this the anguish. And so we're going to see the anguish that is going on amongst the Lord's people. And so let's go ahead to the text. And we're going to cover the first verse, and then I have kind of a mini lesson that we can learn from the first verse, because I think it applies to America today. So Judges chapter 6, verse 1. Then the sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord handed them over to Midian for 7 years. And so we've just come off the back of 40 years of peace under Deborah, and then we're going to have 7 years of oppression under the Midianites. And so this generation that had fallen back into temptation, most likely had fallen back into idolatry, they had peace. They had blessings. They had a lot of great things going on for them. And as a result, they fell victim to temptation. A little bit of background on the Midianites. So the Midianites actually go all the way back to one of the sons of Abraham by Keturah. They had a son by the name of Midian. That comes from Genesis 25. And then also, if you remember, when Moses first flees Egypt, he actually marries a Midianite woman. So that goes back to Exodus chapter 2. Now, the lesson that I want to take from the very first verse is that when men are prosperous, God becomes an unwanted intrusion. It seems like when times are good, men can become so obsessed with their own achievements, their own possessions, their own getting everything that they can and enjoying things. It seems that you're more likely to fall susceptible to that. And so it made me start thinking about the world that we live in today with America. We're during a time of peace, a time of, I know there's probably recessions and issues that are coming up, but generally it's a good time, a time to make money. Things are going well. But our environment is such that kind of as a consumer and as a member of a capitalistic society, the thing that's kind of being sold to us is to buy more and more, to consume more and more, because we have such a great time of blessing. And this blew my mind when I read this. So if you had to guess, anyone can say anything, so if you had to guess, how much do you think was spent in advertising alone in 2022? If you had to guess. Like a dollar amount. 60 billion? It's a good number. What else? Anyone else have an idea? You think higher or lower? Higher than 60 million or lower? Higher? What was that? Yes. Oh, yeah. 60 billion. Yeah. So you think higher? Steve says higher than 60 billion? He says higher. Okay. Anyone else? A little bit higher? Okay. Oh, lower. Okay. We have one lower. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. So apparently it was $95.2 billion was spent on advertising just in 2022. The reason why that much money is being spent on advertising is because it works. It gets people to buy things, and that is what is being kind of put forth before us. And the reason why I think this is important is because when you're looking at the consumer society and the peaceful times that we live in and how the world wants us to just consume and buy and enjoy, and then you see the call to service that the Bible has. It's almost a contradiction in a way of life. Here's why. Because the consumer society, especially today, between what we want and what we get, that time is so finite. You know, you can have an idea of something you want, you go on Amazon, you buy it, it can be with us the next day. I have a point. I am getting there, so just follow me. So with consumer society, there's the desire, you can get what you want, and it can consume all of your time. I mean, with all the streaming services, you can watch something every single day, every single minute, every single hour of the day. When you look at what God has called us to do, the reward is something that you don't get as quickly as you do with the consumerist society. When you serve someone, it takes a lot of planning and preparation and hard work, and it may be days, weeks before you get any appreciation or any payoff. And so the two kind of lives between a Christian and a consumer are ones that are very different. So we have to watch out for the environment that we have for our children and for ourselves so that we don't fall prey to the consumer society, and yet we make time to do the things of a Christian. And so to kind of further build on this, I want to talk about how much environment can affect our behavior. And so I hope that this won't be going too much on a tirade, but something that you might find very interesting. So here's a picture of a family. I believe it's from the 40s or 50s. So this is a Hungarian family. And so the father had a little bit of an idea. He wanted to prove that children could make exceptional achievements if they've been trained early on. And so what he did was, with of course his wife in agreement, they shaped their children's lives completely around chess. They hung pictures of major chess champions on the wall. They bought books. They trained their children. They were very involved in their children playing chess from a very, very young age. And so they were shaping their environment to teach them chess and to love chess. And the parents were involved in such a way that whenever they had competitions, they took very meticulous notes on the people they would be playing against. So the whole family was involved in making them know and love chess. So they had 3 girls. Do you think that they achieved a lot through the way that their environment had shaped them? Another interesting note is that they homeschooled their children. This is a time when no one did homeschool, especially in Hungary, no one did homeschool. So of the 3 little girls, There was one girl, I think it was the oldest one, the father actually caught her at like 1 o'clock in the morning in the bathroom playing chess. And so the dad was like, you have to go to sleep. She's like, no, I just want to play one more game. This is how much it was ingrained in them to love chess and to play it. So the oldest girl, by the name of Susan, by the age of 4.5, she was already beating adults at chess. She achieved the title of Hungarian and American Grandmaster titles. The next oldest, Sophia, by 14, became a world champion, and a few years later, a grandmaster. Now, the youngest girl, by the age of 12, she was listed as the top 100 chess players in the world. By age 15 and a half, she achieved the title grandmaster. She was actually the youngest chess player to get that, even younger than Bobby Fischer, who you may have heard of. And for 27 years, she was the #1 female chess player in the world. And so, when you look at a family whose entire priority and their entire life was shaped around chess and reinforcing chess and teaching chess, the children grew to not only love chess, but to excel at chess. Now let's make a little bit of kind of an application for us. Now that we've seen how much the environment can impact the children and what they love and what they do, what if we were to surround our children's environment with things of the Bible and Bible characters and Bible study, and the parents were involved and passionate about it? Do you think we could shape our children? Now, what about our environment, even as adults? How can we shape our environment so that we are promoting and living the life of a Christian and not the life of a consumer like the world is trying to shape us for? It's going to take a lot of control over our environment, but I think it's definitely something that we can do. So if this is something that piques your interest as a behaviorist, I love this kind of stuff. If you want to know more about how can I change my environment or the environment of my family to promote Christian living and Christian habits, if you've never heard of this book, there's a book by the name of Atomic Habits. And so it's very, very popular. If you know anything about the self-help world, it's a very popular book. It's all about creating habits that stick. There's a lot of habits that need to be present in Christians' lives. If you want to see how to start them and to continue them, I'll make that recommendation. So I hope that we saw that these people drifted off because of the peace and the prosperity. We see that we live in a time of peace and prosperity and a world that wants us to consume rather than serve. We're going to have to take control over our lives and to make sure that we're finding the Christian life reinforcing and beneficial. And so it's going to take a little bit of change. So I hope that kind of made sense. Let's go back to the text, to verse number 2. Now the power of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of Midian, the sons of Israel made for themselves the dens, which were in the mountains, and the caves and the strongholds. So essentially, God's people left their homes, they ran to the mountains to hide. For whenever Israel had sown, the Midianites would come up with the Amalekites and the people of the east and march against them. And so, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie A Bug's Life. I don't know if that's Disney or, I know it's Pixar. I think it's Pixar before it was Disney. So have you ever seen A Bug's Life where you have the grasshoppers come and they eat all of the food that the ants have? That's basically what's happening here. So you have the Midianites, they come, they're taking all of God's people's food, and they have all of their animals, and they're going to come through and just eat everything. Verse 4. So they would camp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, so very, very far down near to where Egypt was. And they leave no sustenance in Israel, nor a sheep, ox, or donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents. They would come in like locusts in number, and both they and their camels were innumerable. And they came into the land to ruin it. So the animals came in, just devouring everything that was on the land. Verse 6. So Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. And so, verse 7, now it came about when the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord on account of Midian, that the Lord sent a prophet to the sons of Israel. Notice the very quick response by God. They cry out to God. God is going to send them a prophet with a message. And he said to them, the prophet, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. It was I who brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery. And I rescued you from the hands of the Egyptians and from the hands of all your oppressors. And I drove them out from you and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live. But you have not obeyed me, notice the message that God sends the prophet, there's no solution yet. God's not telling them about Gideon. He's not telling them he's going to raise up a judge to deliver them. He's simply informing them why these things are occurring to them. They have followed the wrong gods, and so that is why this calamity has come upon them. And so what God is doing is he's speaking through his prophet to give them a warning, to give them a prompt. You need to change. But in God's mercy, he's going to be preparing Gideon. Now, let's go on to the next section, which will be from verses 11 through 23. And I've titled this section, The Angel, or the Angel of the Lord. Verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, and his son Gideon was beating out wheat, or he was threshing the wheat. So the wheat threshing would be where you separate the heads of the wheat from the stalks. And they was in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. And so he's doing this in secret. If the Midianites would have caught him, most likely he would have been killed. So let's continue on to verse 12. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, valiant warrior." Now, in some ways, he was valiant because he was opposing the will of the Midianites, making sure that his people had food, doing this in secret. But I think this is also a little bit of a prophecy for Gideon, because he wasn't a valiant warrior yet. From everything we've seen, he looks like he's just a farmer. But if we're going to look into the next chapter, we're going to see that Gideon is definitely a valiant warrior, one who trusts in God. Verse 13. Then Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, 'Did the Lord not bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to Midian." So he's asking the angel of the Lord, why are we going through these hardships? Why is this occurring? I've heard good things of the Lord. 14. And the Lord looked at him and said, "Go in this strength of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you?" So Gideon is asking the angel of the Lord, why are these hardships coming upon you? The angel says, you're the solution. You're it. Have I not sent you? So the fact the angel of the Lord said, have I not sent you, it says that Gideon has the authority and he has the power to deliver God's people. And so I have a little bit of a mini lesson that I want us to consider here. Because sometimes the one who sees the trouble, the one who sees the issue, may be the one that God has designated to solve the problem. Because it's that person who has identified a problem. There's a quote that I liked. It says, "A problem well stated is a problem half solved." And so if you know that there's a problem, then what can you do and how can you help? And so as I was thinking about this point, I think there's a lot of great things that are going on here at Centerpoint. And so it wasn't all that long ago that there was kind of an issue that was identified in terms of preparing meals for people, right? And so a problem was noted, or a need was noted. There are people who need meals, and we readily see the issue at hand. And so what was the next steps for the men? It said, okay, well, we need a freezer. We need people to make the meals. We need someone to organize the meals. I think it's Abby who's kind of doing the oversight of the meals in the freezer. And so there's an issue that was identified. The need was met. Let's come up with kind of another, not necessarily an issue or a problem, but for a congregation, the more fellowship, the better. You can never have too much fellowship at a congregation. I guess maybe depending upon who you ask. But fellowship is a good thing. And so this goes back to Jessica. I know I've praised you before in class, but Jessica has organized the ladies' night to be able to get together and to eat the meal. That is kind of identifying that there's a need, and you coordinated it. Said this is where we're going to eat, and offered it to everyone to be able to enjoy. Troy has done the same thing, realizing that the men can have more fellowship time, and so you've organized the men's breakfast. And so again, a problem is seen, and then the solution is met. Also, I know that there's a lot of men here who do a great job with the building and the aesthetics of the building and making sure that it looks good, because this building is really kind of an outward representation of the people who are in here. And so it's important for us to take care of the building, that it looks good, so that people see that not only are we good stewards, but that we take pride in what we do. We do it well. And so this goes to the parking lot that we've planned and the sound booth and everything is going on. People have identified issues and then solved it. And so the question that all of us have to ask tonight is, do you see any other issues? Because if you do, you may be the person God has put to help find the solution. And so with Gideon, he saw the issue, and the angel of the Lord says, "You're it, I've sent you." And so let's go on to verse number 15. But he said to him, "O Lord, how am I to save Israel? Behold, my family is the least in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my father's house." So this shows a great deal of humility on behalf of Gideon. And that's going to be very useful in order for him to follow God's plan. Now, humility can also be corrupted. Humility can start out good and then turn bad. And so I found a cross-reference that I found really interesting. Because when Saul is called to be king, he says almost the exact same thing word for word. So listen to what Saul said. 1 Samuel 9:21. And Saul answered and said, "Am I not a Benjamite, of the smallest of the tribes of Israel? And my family, the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then do you speak like this to me?" So what is the difference between Gideon, who's called by God, has humility, and from what we see when Saul is called to be king, to be the anointed, he also shows that humility, but he does not live out his reign faithfully. What's the difference between the two? And I think the difference between the two, as we're going to see, is that Gideon keeps his eyes on God. Saul keeps his eyes on the people. And he's actually going to make a lot of decisions that please the people, but goes against God's will. And a good cross-reference for this, for you and I as Christians, is a statement that Paul makes in Galatians 1:10. Paul says, "For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I still pleased men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ." And sometimes when it comes to pleasing God, it's not always going to please men. It's not always going to work out that way. And something that's kind of been on my mind, I know it's something that Georgie and I have had to deal with, is that it's Pride Month coming out. And I don't know what your companies and your businesses are taking a stance on, but we may have to make decisions in this next month that are not going to please our bosses or our employees or the people that we work around, but it's much more important for us to please God than the people that we work with. And so we may have to deal with more of those kind of issues. It seems like that whole group is becoming more and more bold, and it's entering more into the workplace. And so let's please God and not men. Verse 16, "Yet the Lord said to him, I will certainly be with you, and you will defeat Midian as one man." So he has assurance. You have everything you need. Essentially, him, the angel of the Lord. Verse 17, "So Gideon said to him, If now I have found favor in your sight, then perform for me a sign that it is you speaking with me." So he's basically asking for authentication. And so we might kind of begin to slam Gideon, saying, "Really? Like you want authentication?" But remember, God even gave authentication to Moses. Do you remember when he commanded Moses to go into Pharaoh and to call his people out? Do you remember some of the signs that God gave to him? There was the rod that was in his hand, cast it down, turned it into a snake. Picked it back up, turned it into a rod. His hand inside the robe was leprous, became whole. And then, I have it written down, the last one. The water into blood. And so he was given ample evidence, and so Gideon is also asking for evidence. So verse 18, "Please do not depart from here," so this is still Gideon talking, "until I come back to you and bring out my offering and lay it before you." And he said, "I will remain until you return." So the fact that he is remaining behind to receive the offering, this is another indication that this is deity. This is a theophany. This is who we would call Christ as the angel of the Lord, but this is before, of course, he came to earth. So this is God making an appearance. Verse 19, "Then Gideon went in and prepared a young goat and unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. He put the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, and brought them out to him under the oak and presented them. And the angel of God said to him, 'Take the meat and the unleavened bread and lay them on this rock, and pour out the broth.' And he did so. Then the angel of the Lord put out the end of the staff that was in his hand, and touched the meat and the unleavened bread. And fire came up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. Then the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. When Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord, he said, O Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. So Gideon's convinced this is from God. And so look at what he's going to do next. He's going to think that he's going to die. Verse 23, then the Lord said to him, peace to you. Do not be afraid. You shall not die. And so Gideon thought that he had seen the angel of the Lord. He had seen, and then he was going to die. But God encourages him. Now let's go on to the altars, verse 24 through 32. Then Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and named it, The Lord is Peace. To this day it is still in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Now, on the same night the Lord said to him, take your father's bull and a second bull, 7 years old, and tear down the altar of Baal, which belongs to your father, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it. So these are these idolatrous altars and figures. And build an altar to the Lord your God on the top of this stronghold in an orderly way. And take a second bull and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah, which you shall cut down. And so God is going to bring Gideon into the forefront of the people by taking a stance against idolatry. And really, he's going to be tearing down his own family's idolatrous practices. And so I want to take just a moment to think about how God is preparing Gideon to be a leader. Now, obviously, these idolatrous figures belong to his father. And so people would have known that they belonged to him. But really, family practices can compromise leadership. And so if Gideon was to lead the charge of God's people and to deliver them from idolatry, and yet his very family were to worship idols, that's going to compromise his leadership. And so often family practices can not only compromise leadership, but family practices can also compromise reputation and influence. Or family practices can complement reputation and influence. And so let's think about that for just a moment. So let's say here at Centerpoint Road, let's say that there's a family and someone sees them out in the community and they say, oh, well, they're a member of Centerpoint Road Church of Christ. I don't want to go there. Or they see the family and they say, oh, they're a member of Centerpoint Road Church of Christ. I want to go there. Family practice can impact reputation and influence and leadership. And so we see the same thing with Gideon. Gideon's going to have to take a stand against his family and their idolatrous practices. Verse 27, then Gideon took 10 men from his servants and did as the Lord had spoken to him. And because he was too afraid of his father's household and the men of the city to do it by day, he did it by night. So he's following the Lord's instructions, but he is still growing in his faith. He's not perhaps as bold as he could be. And so you've probably experienced it too. It's very easy to have a show of faith within these walls. When you get outside, it's a little bit harder to show your faith. It takes a little bit greater maturity. Verse 28. When the people of the city got up early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal had been cut down, and the Asherah which had been beside it had been cut down. And the second bull had been offered on the altar which had been built. So they said to one another, who did this thing? And when they searched and inquired, they said, Gideon, the son of Joash, did this thing. Then the men of the city said to Joash, bring out your son, that he may die. For he has torn down the altar of Baal, and indeed he has cut down the Asherah which was beside it. So note their zeal. They're willing to to basically betray their deliverer and to offer him up to death. And so zeal and devotion is not always a sign of righteousness. And so this goes even back to the Christian age when Christ had his ministry. He warned his apostles, they will put you out of the synagogues. Yes, the time is coming that whoever kills you will think that he offers God service. And so these people who are supposed to be gods, they had a zeal, but they wanted to kill him. Verse 31, but Joash said to all who stood against him, will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? Whoever will contend for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, since someone has torn down his altar. So the dad is basically saying, why are you defending a God who can't even defend themselves? And so you can fast forward to the prophet Elijah. And so Elijah has thrown the gauntlet down, and he told the prophets of Baal that, you have the sacrifice prepared, I'll have a sacrifice prepared. You call out to Baal, and if he answers, then hey, he's God. And if the true God answers, then he is God. And of course, Baal doesn't answer because he's not a God. He's an idol. There's no power. Verse 32. Therefore, on that day, he named Gideon Jerubbaal, that is to say, let Baal contend against him, because he had torn down his altar. So now let's go on to the next section, the anointing. Judges 6, 33 through 35, so just a couple of verses. Then all the Midianites, the Amalekites, and the people of the east assembled together, and they crossed over and camped in the valley of Jezreel. And so they're going to do what they've done before. They're marching through, they're going to bring all their animals, they're going to take all the food, the animals are going to consume all of the food, and they're setting up their base of operations in a very fertile valley, a place that's great to house all of them and all of their livestock. They don't think that there's going to be any resistance. Verse 34. So the Spirit of the Lord covered Gideon like clothing, and he blew a trumpet, and the Bezrites were called together to follow him. So he is inspired, he is following God's plan. Verse 35, and he sent messengers throughout Manasseh, and they also were called together to follow him. And he sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they came to meet them. So this is what we alluded to back in the introduction. If you remember under Barak and Deborah, Asher stayed home. They stayed on the coast. They didn't involve themselves. This time, Asher is going to come to the fight. And so here is all of the tribes that are mentioned that are going to be going to war. You have Asher, Naphtali, Zebulun, and Manasseh. And then I put here kind of the general location of where the Jezreel Valley was. The Jezreel Valley was a very large section. But since these are the nations that were called to fight, it kind of makes sense that it would be somewhere right within their areas. And so the Jezreel Valley was near Mount Carmel. Because again, going back to Elijah, when he ran down from Mount Carmel, he went into the Jezreel Valley. So here we're going to have the beginning of the fight. Now, the last couple of verses, we have the assurance. Verse 36. Then Gideon said to God, if you are going to save Israel through me, as you have spoken, behold, I am putting a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on all the ground, then I will know that you will save Israel through me, as you have spoken. And it was so. When he got up early the next morning and wrung out the fleece, he wrung the dew from the fleece, a bowl full of water. Verse 39, he's going to ask again. Then Gideon said to God, do not let your anger burn against me, so that I may speak only one more time. Please let me put you to the test only one more time with the fleece. Let it now be dry only on the fleece, and let there be dew on all the ground. And so he already knew he was on shaky ground. He says, basically, don't punish me. I just want more assurance. And so, verse 40, God did so that night, for it was dry only on the fleece, and dew was on all the ground. So again, we see that God is very patient in growing his servant's faith, in showing him and assuring him he is with them, and that the plans are going to go through. Now, let's move on to some of the lessons. But is there anything that sticks out of the text or an observation that maybe you've had so far? I'll just pause real quick. Art.
I want to know who the prophet was that was sent, verse 7.
Yeah, me too.
Or 8.
Yeah, that'd be nice. No name.
You didn't come across anything on that?
No. No hypothesis or anything. I don't know. Maybe someone has a hypothesis, but I don't know. I don't know if there's any contemporaries that we mentioned during Gideon's time. I don't know. But no, nothing came up in my studies. I'll try and maybe do a little bit of extra research and see. But just a prophet of God, apparently someone who God could use, and I guess he's part of the remnant, so a faithful person of God that's not necessarily mentioned in this story. So any other comments or anything? All right, let's go on to lesson number 1 from chapter 6. Sin reduces God's child to a caveman. I don't mean caveman in the evolutionary sense. I'm just talking about it makes them kind of hermits. It makes them not bold. It makes them withdrawn. And so this comes from verse number 2. When God's people made for themselves dens, which were in the mountains, caves, and the strongholds. And so perhaps I am a caveman Christian if my light is kept hidden. So just like the child song, hide it under a bushel. No, I'm going to let it shine. It's very elementary, but it's also very profound. So I can be a caveman if I let my light be hidden. Now, light naturally shines. It's just a product of light. But when there is sin or when there is darkness in our lives, it naturally wants to hide. It naturally wants to kind of go into itself and to hide. But the more that we cast off sin and walk in holiness, the more that our light kind of naturally shines. And that can, of course, be shown in serving others as a part of our natural life. Also part of it, just exposing darkness. The very fact that maybe we have practices that we don't go along with our friends or at work, and so that by its, just the fact that we don't join in can allow our light to shine. And so sin has a lot of detrimental effects. It definitely can destroy our zeal. It can really make us as Christians, as is stated here, kind of be reclusive. Hebrews 12:1 says that sin is a heavy weight. It is something that ensnares or traps and weighs us down. And so I want to kind of open it up to the class because all of us have experienced sin. And so what are ways that you have noticed in yourself, or maybe you've noticed it in others, that if there is sin in the individual's life or in the Christian's life, how does it affect you? Does it affect you letting your light shine at all? Do you notice a difference? And so how can it change your Christian walk when there is sin in your life? Does it change anything?
Changes our order of importance.
So it can change our priorities, kind of, like what's important to us, so it can kind of swap things around. I've known that, sometimes when people are struggling with the sin, you'll maybe notice that, they don't show up to church. They don't come. And so that can kind of weigh them down in that way. Their priorities change. They realize there's something that they need to change, and it really halts the Christian life in a lot of ways. So yeah, changes priority or order. What else?
Just your attitude when you're here is changed.
Mm.
When you're closer to God, it's very uplifting to come to the services, but if you've got something in your life that's distracting you, class and services can actually seem boring.
Absolutely. And so I think it kind of piggybacks off of what Travis was saying, where it changes your priorities. And in the moment when you are going to worship, and if you have this on your conscience, then it can really make it boring. Like, why am I even here? What's really the purpose? Because you've got to get something right with God before you come before him into worship. And so that can, of course, weigh down on our worship. So absolutely. What else? Anything else? Because the next lesson kind of piggybacks a little bit off of this. It's in line with sin that we see from the text. All right, let's go on to lesson number 2. Sin also impoverishes. Judges 6:6. So Israel was brought very low. The NKJV says greatly impoverished because of Midian, and the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. And so the point from this is that sin impoverishes. You may or may not have noticed, I did use the NASB for for the verses in chapter 6. The more that I've been studying, the more I've kind of been drawn to the NASB. It does a good job with some of the words that it uses, and so at least for Wednesday night, I think I'll switch over to there. But anyway, sin impoverishes. So sin takes away a lot of the good things that God would have us to enjoy. Consider some of the ways that sin can impoverish. Sexual sin can rob us of our marriages. It can definitely rob us of the joy of our marriages. You consider drugs and alcohol. They can actually rob us of our health. And in fact, there's a lot of studies that have been done recently since marijuana is becoming much more prevalent. I don't think it's legal in Iowa. I don't know. It's not. Okay. But I know there's a lot of other states that have legalized it. When I lived in Alaska, there was a dispensary on like every single street corner. Like they were everywhere. And so all of these studies are coming out now realizing that, in fact, marijuana is not actually helpful to your health. It's actually detrimental. It brings a lot of problems out. Same thing with alcohol. You may have heard for a number of years, moderate alcohol is good for your health. Now the studies show there is no health benefits for alcohol, period. That's it. There's no defense for alcohol being beneficial to health. It's actually detrimental. So again, drugs and alcohol can also rob us of our health. Think of crime, such as murder or theft. It can rob us of years of our life. If we don't end up in prison, it can rob us from just peace of mind. Always looking over your shoulder, thinking that something is going to happen. And so sin impoverishes. And so again, I want to ask you, what have you guys seen sin rob people of? Probably all of us have seen people who've just lost their entire families, lost friends because of sin. But what else have you seen sin rob people of? Art.
Joy and trust. Other people couldn't trust them. Fella became a thief and got caught. And nobody could trust him after that.
Yep. That's I think that's one of the biggest things that gets lost with sin is reputation. Because even if you're forgiven of God, I mean, it's very hard to repair a damaged reputation. I mean, that's why when I was in preaching school, they said that protect your reputation. Because if you lose your reputation as a preacher, it's gone. Like, I mean, probably no one's going to hire you. Your reputation's gone. That's like what you offer a congregation is your name. And so reputation can get lost with sin. So that's definitely a major one. I didn't even have that in the notes, but that's a really good point. Anything else? Jan?
I was just thinking that kids are robbed of a lot of things when, like, they're born out of wedlock, or divorce is like a ready answer. Kids are robbed of a lot of things in the family environment.
Absolutely. So something we didn't even bring up is how really it's the children who suffer probably the most for the sins of the parents. When I was working in the schools, the majority of the children I worked with, they had a history of maybe the mom was abusing alcohol or drugs while she was pregnant. And so that caused a lot of developmental disorders with the children. And so they had to suffer because of their parents. And so it's sad to see that occur. Like there's even children who were born addicted to heroin because their mom was using. No fault of their own. And they're brought into the world like that, and they're the ones that suffer. Absolutely. So sin, it robs. Okay, last one. Let's see if we can get one more lesson in. Workers sometimes have to thresh wheat in a wine press. This goes back to verse number 11. We see Gideon was doing this, and this is not ideal at all. This is just something that he had to do in order to get the food and to keep it hidden. And so the point here is that God's people a lot of times have to work in situations that are undesirable or not conducive to the work. You know, sometimes there's a lot of ways that we can be handicapped. And so it may be that we are working around a ungodly culture. Like we're working around people who just don't care about spiritual matters. They don't care about the Bible. So maybe we try and say like, hey, we've got a VBS going on. And they're like, we don't care. That's the reality of the world. But it doesn't mean that we don't have VBSs. Doesn't mean we don't knock on doors or invite people. We still have an obligation. But working in an ungodly culture is just, it's something that we just have to kind of deal with. Maybe that we have a low budget. So perhaps if we had more money, things could work better. But that doesn't mean that we should not work. It just means that that's maybe something we have to work around. Could be family issues. If you're struggling personally or at home, it makes service or church work 10 times harder. And so if you're having family issues, that can, of course, just weigh you down. It could also be a lack of workers. Maybe there's other people who don't want to help you. That's less than ideal. Of course, anything can go easier with more people, but it could be that you're all alone. So all of these issues, I mean, it can be very common, but the point is to bring this up and say, we shouldn't be discouraged as God's people because it's characterized God's people throughout all of the years. Sometimes we have to work in less than ideal conditions. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the resources we need to do the work. Because if we're doing God's work, we have God on our side. And when you and God make a team, you'll win every time. This goes back to 1 John 5:14 and 15. I'll read this and then we'll conclude class. Now this is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have the petitions that we have asked of him. So if you are working and doing the Lord's will and you ask him for help, you can be assured you have the things that you need to go ahead and just do the work. And God is with you. All right, let's go ahead and have a prayer, and then we'll end class. Almighty Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight, thankful for this time that we have to open up the book of Judges, to see Gideon, to see his faith as it is emerging, and seeing all of the amazing things you were able to work through him. We know that all the power comes from you. We pray that you will please bless our efforts as we strive to be a light to this community and as we strive to help each other and to help the world. We ask for your blessings. We especially come at the middle of this week. We know that we have a few more days left. We ask that you will please deliver us from temptation, give us the strength to walk in the light and to do those things that are pleasing to you. We know that Pride Month is coming up, and there's a lot of ungodliness that is promoted. We ask for strength and boldness that we can simply follow your will and that we can let our lights shine and not be compromised. We love you, Father. We pray that you will please watch over Colleen, that she can continue to recover. We ask that you'll be with anyone here at the congregation who are going through difficult times. We ask that you will see them through and give them the strength that they need. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.